real conversations, and some hard truths. Gangs, drugs, and guns. Giving a voice to those willing to sacrifice. We have stories that need to be told. We have lessons that need to be taught. Protect and serve. Welcome to The Quiet Professional. Welcome back, everyone. Nathan Romas with you. And today we've got a very special guest in. We've got John Gogan from STARS Air Ambulance. And STARS, if people don't know what that stands for, is the Shock Trauma Air Rescue Service. And just a bit of background on John. He is from New Brunswick. He obtained a Bachelor of Kinesiology from the University of New Brunswick. During the summers while attending university, John worked for Eastern Canada's Waterways and Oceans with the Canadian Coast Guard Inshore Rescue Program, because nothing can ever be a short name. John then studied French at the University of Quebec, Chicoutimi, where he was also introduced to commercial aviation. So he spent the past 27 years flying all over Canada, and he's worked some pretty cool partners. So he's done some projects with National Geographic, The Nature of Things, and the NASA Mars Rover project. John then worked for 3 years with Ontario's Air Ambulance program before moving west to work with STARS. He helped develop the Winnipeg STARS base as Provincial Director in Manitoba. He is now the Director for Provincial Operations in Northern Alberta. He continues to fly for STARS as a captain, and he works on supporting PTSI initiatives for first responders and consults with film companies on helicopter safety and realism. And because he doesn't do enough already, he finds some time to do commercial voiceover work and be a family man. So you're a busy guy.
Yeah, first and foremost, a dad, then a husband. Yeah, it's hard to believe you can pack all that in 30 years.
Yeah. So, welcome, and thanks for taking some time to come chat with us today. I know you're a busy guy, but we're glad to have you here.
Yeah, it's my pleasure to spend some time with you today.
So if you could kind of just start from the beginning, tell us a bit about yourself and how you got into flying.
Sure. I think first and foremost, I never intended to be an aviator. My dad was in the Air Force. My grandparents, my grandfather in the East Coast was in the Airborne back in World War II. But my first and initial dream was to be a 5-star architect for Caribbean resorts. Again, if I could go back and talk to the 19-year-old self, I'd go back and take math and shoot at that. But I went into a kinesiology degree at UNB back east in Fredericton. I think it was around my second year, I had a doctor, her name was Dr. McLaughlin, who was giving this incredible anthropology forensics course and was teaching forensics. She was working with the RCMP on the side on a fairly major murder investigation that, with my time in Coast Guard, we inexplicably were kind of linked. Unfortunately, we were finding the victims of this incident along the riverways in New Brunswick. And when I heard her talk about what was going to be presented in these courses, I started to become really interested in forensics. So every year I would take a couple of courses. That led me into the thought of maybe going into policing. When I was in northern Quebec in Chicoutimi, taking some conversational French, was in kind of a bit of a holding pattern from a policing standpoint, as a lot of people were back in the early 90s. One of the women in my class, her husband knew an individual who was kind of flying back and forth down to Quebec, Montreal, got the opportunity to fly with him from time to time, just on a whim. And then his friend in Sudbury was opening up a flight school. I was kind of in a holding pattern, and one thing led to another, and 30 years later, here I am.
So to kind of back up a bit, because you're saying you have family that's done service as well, and specifically been in flying aircraft. So even from a young age, was there any kind of interest or anybody kind of pushing you in the direction of flying?
My dad worked for a company that from time to time would have small aircraft. We did have a few family friends that were in aviation. And the aviation and the policing were a pretty big part of my upbringing. my uncle was an RCMP officer back east, and he would go over to Cavendish in the summertime. And I would get an opportunity as a young kid to go and spend time with my Uncle Tom. And of course, as a 9 or 10-year-old, spending time with your uncle who's an RCMP officer in Prince Edward Island was pretty amazing. And from time to time as well, there would be opportunities to either get close to helicopters or get close to fixed-wing aircraft. It just was never the thing that I was searching out. But once I got those experiences in northern Quebec with Serge, it became something that was extraordinarily fascinating to me. And then once I got into aviation, I had a very serious car accident. I made some pretty poor decisions in a row one evening, and nearly killed my brother in my early 20s. My brother and I both, I was driving, we were in a very serious car accident in New Brunswick. And it was in those moments in the ambulance and watching all the first responders take care of my brother and I as we made our way to the St. John Regional Hospital, that I knew without a doubt that no matter what I did in a career, it needed to be something that made a difference. I didn't know what that was going to be at the time, but I knew that it needed to be part of what I would be in the future.
So that's where you kind of started thinking about the policing side of things?
Yeah, that was the policing initiative. And then once that opportunity kind of not evaporated, but once I had a different change of mindset in my 20s, once I get into aviation, I knew early days, both because the air ambulance program in Ontario landed and flew over our flight school in Sudbury all the time. But I just knew once I spoke to the air ambulance team in Ontario at the Sudbury airport over the course of a couple of months that every decision I was going to make once I got into helicopter aviation was going to drive me towards helicopter EMS.
All right, pretty cool. Well, so when you started out though, did you start with the fixed wing or you started in helicopters? Or can you do both? I don't know what training is involved in all that.
Yeah, I'm not military. So if you go through the military program, generally speaking, you'll go through fixed wing and then you remuster or get repositioned into an opportunity to either go into helicopters, jets, or larger transport aircraft. I took the commercial route. So I did mostly take a helicopter course in Sudbury. When I went to take my instrument rating and my night rating, I actually got my fixed wing license at that time because it was purely about economics. It was less expensive to do it on a plane than it was a helicopter. So that was my fixed wing experience. I've had a number of opportunities over the years to fly in fixed wings, everything from small Cessnas to jets to some corporate jets, and just support the aviation team and fly along with them. That's been a lot of fun. But helicopters was always the route for me.
Is there a big difference between flying a plane and a helicopter? Is one harder than the other?
I think it depends on which pilot you're talking to. I think they both have their complexities for sure. A lot of what people experience in aviation is kind of in film and TV. I think both, I call them both weapons. They both have a very intentional purpose for what they do. And I think that depending on distance and range and speed and altitude and weather, one can be better than the other. And they both really have their uses. As to which one is harder, again, I don't have enough jet and fixed wing time to determine how difficult it is to land in, difficult conditions. But I think on any given day, you have to have a lot of belief in yourself, and you have to have some extraordinary training to fly either platform, be it rotary or fixed wing.
I'm just thinking that maybe I didn't realize this when I asked the question. Maybe I was just setting up you for to start up a rivalry. But is there like a rivalry between
100%
the airplane and helicopter pilots?
Yeah. Sling wing, fixed wing. It's there's always been a rivalry forever. And again, I've always been of the mind where I personally think, from a helicopter EMS standpoint, one of the most incredible opportunities that's coming in the future is vertical takeoff and lift. So if you look at films like Terminator, Avatar, virtually everything you see now in those films is kind of looking into the future. It's a vehicle that can take off like a helicopter, so you don't need an extraordinarily long runway. You don't need the infrastructure. And it can fly at altitudes and speeds like a plane. So you can get into things like de-icing. You can fly at higher altitudes. It's pressurized. And there is, I think many of your listeners would have seen the Osprey, which is a military vertical takeoff and lift.
It's got the two big propellers.
It's got the two
one
big
on either
propellers.
side.
Yep. There is a commercial version of that, which is in development and has just started to get approved by different aviation entities across the world. I think the future, particularly in a country like Canada, where you have vast, distances between hospitals, vertical takeoff and lift, could be the future. One of the biggest challenges we have here in Canada is we're in icing conditions about 9 months a year. So most helicopters in the world do not have de-icing systems, which means that we can be limited in conditions under 0 degrees in cloud. That's where the fixed wing is a fantastic weapon, right? It has heated edges of its wings and de-icing systems. Yeah. If you're ever fortunate enough to be looking out the window when you come in and land, you will during the winter time, if you look along the leading edge of the wing, you can often see ice that's built up. And one of two things will happen. It either has a steel edge and it heats up and you'll see the ice melt away, or it has a balloon that inflates and you'll see the ice disappear. It kind of flies off.
Like a balloon inside
like
of
a
the
balloon
wing?
inside on the leading edge of the wing. Yeah.
Okay.
So if you're ever flying in a plane in conditions, that are below zero and you're in cloud, have a look out the window and you'll actually see it. And as they come in to land, right around the time they hit the, you hear the bell just before you're coming in to land, you'll often see them as part of their pre-land checklist. They'll make sure that their wings are de-iced so the aircraft can basically fly at slower speeds. There are some de-iced systems in the world for helicopters, but they're extraordinarily expensive and complex.
Oh.
But I think vertical takeoff and lift is probably the answer in the future.
I was about to say there's a $1 billion idea just sitting right there, de-icing for helicopters. You just gave it away.
Well, it's there. Yeah, it's there, and we did play with it a bit at Stars. Again, it was a good system, but extraordinarily difficult to maintain and very expensive. And then obviously, when we're looking at operating across 6 bases, we need to make sure that from a donor dollar standpoint, that all of these systems are as effective and efficient as they possibly could be.
So you were doing your licensing. Where do you kind of go from there? So really the big joke in helicopter license is your first 100 hours. That's how many hours you need to get your helicopter license. It's just a license to hurt yourself badly or kill yourself. At 100 hours, you really don't know much. And I was really fortunate to be the school that I went to in Sudbury. If you placed at the top of your class, you were given a job for the summertime, flying scenic tours at the Big Nickel, and then doing some work for the little FM radio station. So that was the first job that I got. Like a traffic type
thing?
Yeah.
Not unlike our news helicopter here, in Alberta. So that's sort of an idea. So I'd be up on weekends with this little teeny tiny Enstrom helicopter and half tanks of fuel and just giving scenic tours at the Big Nickel and around the Sudbury. Oh. That quickly turned into an opportunity to fly with a company in Northern Ontario out of Chapleau. Again, a small community, but you take whatever opportunities you get. And we've talked, prior to the podcast, we've talked just about opening up, walking through open doors. That led to a couple of year career with a helicopter boss who was dynamic and hilarious and would just give you every opportunity to fly whatever helicopter they had on whatever job, and away you went. And that opened up countless opportunities for me to fly all over Ontario, on Manitoba, Northern Ontario, into the low Arctic. And then after that, to Canadian Helicopters here in Edmonton. Worked really polar shelf project up in the high Arctic BC interior, forest fire fighting. Just so many unbelievable opportunities with that group. Wow.
You've been everywhere.
Yeah, I've been really fortunate. I've flown back east in Newfoundland, up into the Yukon, the territories. I've really been incredibly fortunate to, forest fire fighting took me all across, Western and kind of central Canada. And then the Polar Shelf Project in the Arctic really was where I got to have so many unbelievable experiences, many of which I'd never be able to afford as a civilian to even go back to these places, Nahanni National Park and Olavik National Park and everything. I mean, I've just been so fortunate to have such great adventures.
What's the furthest north that you've kind of done a project? Like, are you going right to, what is the Alert, Nineveh?
Not to
or
Alert,
like,
but
or-
I've been just south of Grise Fjord, Northern Banks Island, Melville Island, Resolute Bay,
Mhm.
all of that area over a number of different summers.
So can you kind of talk about some of the projects, and maybe this kind of bounces around a bit, but like in the bio here, we mentioned that you've worked with National Geographic, the Nature of Things, the NASA Mars rover. So can you kind of tell us about working with some of these companies?
Sure. Yeah. As part of the Polar Shelf Project, they kind of do a multitude of different research and funding projects in the Arctic. Those range from ice shelf projects. So back in the 90s, how was the ice shelf doing? Polar bear surveys, wolf surveys, wolverine, muskox surveys. I was working in Resolute Bay and then south of Cambridge Island. That was the Carrick, kind of the Carrick Bird Reserve. So there's an enormous swath of land that it's a nature reserve for migrating birds up there. So universities from around the world, I think their departments are called ornithology. And if I'm wrong, I'm sorry, but it's basically the study of birds. So these departments would come from all over the world to study a specific type of bird. So we would use the helicopters to move them all around this enormous bird sanctuary. And we would actually work with a number of these companies to band geese. So you would take the helicopter and you would hover behind birds that aren't able to fly because they're in a stage of molting. Their wings are changing throughout the summer. And you would drive them into a net, and then they would close the net around thousands of birds. And then they would, over the course of the next couple of hours, band them. And then they would find out what sex they were, and then just kind of do a quick check on them, and then we would let them all go free. That translated into other projects up in that area. I worked with a division of NASA doing some work on the parachute deployment system
For the rover?
For the future rover projects.
Okay.
And again, that area is very similar to what they expected the terrain to be. And if you've seen movies like The Martian, they're using these terrains in films, and they're using these terrains for testing. Sudbury, Ontario was another area where they would do a lot of terrain testing because just the geography of the area is very similar. So that was really neat to be able to partner with them and to meet those men and women who are working on that project. And then National Geographic, again, it was a lot of filming, flying along the mountaintops of all the different high peaks, all the way from the Arctic down towards the Canadian Rockies into the Banff area. And there's plaques on the top of mountains that tell the height and the mountain. So we would be finding these plaques and just doing a survey. And it was endless. Nature of Things, again, they did a bit of a show about the bird reserve. And it was all about the migration of the Canadian geese, but it was connected to this migration kind of overstop that they would have in the Arctic to protect themselves, and how that group of birds eventually would end up in the southern United States. And that was fantastic.
And most of these opportunities, like you're saying, they come up just from maybe knowing the right people at the right time and kind of getting into things, getting the opportunity given to you there.
Yeah, certainly from an aviation standpoint, it was good fortune, hard work, right people, right time, undoubtedly. As far as the contracts go, I would just have a history of just walking through open doors. The contracts that I was on in the Arctic weren't pretty. You were sleeping in tents for weeks on end, or in a small cabin with 2 or 3 other individuals, eating food out of cans, or boiling your food in the morning, or sometimes having to go out and physically get your own food. So I think part of it was the amazing opportunities came along with the desire to build ours and just take whatever came through the door. And Canadian Helicopters at the time gave me an incredible opportunity to just walk through those doors, and the adventures were fantastic.
Yeah, I think it's like most jobs. If you're willing to say yes to things that come along, and maybe at the time it doesn't seem like the prettiest job opportunity or I don't know, training or whatever it might be. But if you just go and do it, you never know what could come of it.
No, and you don't. And that's really been my pathway, kind of once I got into helicopter EMS and then got into my work with STARS. Early days, Deb, one of our flight nurses, was doing community outreach. So I'm sure we'll get into how we have a lot of fantastic partners, but we have a training and education program where we go out and train first responders about when and how to land the helicopter.
Mm-hmm.
She needed a partner to talk about aviation because as a nurse, she has a tremendous amount of experience with, first response, with initial patient care, with dealing with patients, in the back of the helicopter. And she had been with STARS for quite some time. But she was getting questions during her education seminars, and she wanted, a wingman, for lack of a better term. So she asked me if I would come with her. And again, that was kind of one of the first doors outside of aviation that kind of opened up. That led to a lot of really interesting public speaking opportunities, understanding the politics of speaking with individuals across, the province with different thoughts, values, ideas, questions, concerns. And that prepares you for a lot of other things that came, in life. And then again, the doors opened again in 2009, 2010. During those years, Manitoba was experiencing just historical flooding.
Mm-hmm.
And they asked our organization if we would come and support from a helicopter EMS standpoint. And our founder, Dr. Powell, of course, is like, yeah, absolutely, we'll help.
So where are you at this time? Like, because this is your transition over to STARS.
Mm-hmm. So I'm in about my 7th or 8th year at STARS, and I'm here in Edmonton.
Oh, okay. Sorry. You were in Edmonton, then went to Manitoba to help set that up.
So I was in Edmonton from 2002 until about 2010, 2011.
Okay.
The first time we went to Manitoba was in the early 20s, and 2009, 2010, right around there. And the first opportunity for our team to go in there was really remarkable. One of the most amazing calls I've ever gone on occurred on the first day that we were actually deployed to Manitoba. And then we were asked to come again back in 2011, 2012. When we came the second time, again, it was just so wonderful to support Manitoba, not only from a helicopter EMS standpoint, but my wife's family are all from there. So there was just a sense of pride that came with being there to help.
Mm-hmm.
And before the contract ended, they asked us to stay. And my founder and CEO at the time just kind of put 2 and 2 together, and really without anything on a resume, he said, look, your wife and her family are from Manitoba. We've kind of seen the direction that you've taken within the organization. How would you like to start up the program in Manitoba? And that was just another amazing door to walk through.
So I want to back up just a little bit. So when you're doing a lot of different projects, what company were you with when you had all the opportunities with Nat Geo? And
that was Canadian Helicopters out of Edmonton. It was at the old municipal airport.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
So a ways ago.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, they Canadian Helicopters that have been around. They were initially Okanagan Helicopters, and then they rebranded over the years. I'm sure there's possibly even still people flying for Canadian that used to be with Okanagan.
Are they still based out of here?
They have a division out of the Edmonton International Airport. They also have a training school down in Penticton.
Okay.
Yeah, and they were just one of the preeminent helicopter companies. It's one of the ones that many people wanted to work for in the day. So when my company that I was working for in Northern Ontario ran into some financial challenges, which is another whole group of stories we could talk about sometime. Like showing up at the Sault Ste. Marie airport with a tail rotor and showing up to my helicopter with a chain around the tail rotor and a private jet and 2 guys there to repo it long before repoing was a thing. It was
repoing a helicopter.
Repoing a helicopter, yeah. Bell Textron guys out of Texas.
I've never heard of such a thing.
Well,
wow.
it was a thing long before there was a TV show. And despite a lot of great effort, that company got into some financial challenges, and one thing led to another, and I found myself moving out west to fly with Canadian, and they opened up again tons of opportunities.
So you're with Canadian, and then when's the move over to STARS, and what does that kind of look like?
Yeah, so mostly single engine work with Canadian all over Western Canada. And then in early 1999, got wind that their helicopter EMS program in Ontario, which is now called Orange, it was run by Canadian Helicopters at the time, were expanding into 4 new bases. So that was always kind of my goal, was to get onto helicopter EMS. And that was the routing that I was taking. So took my instrument rating, and then got my instrument rating on helicopters. and got an opportunity to go to Kenora, Ontario, which was one of the 4 new bases that was opened, and got myself as a first officer onto the S-76, which is a type of helicopter that they used in Ontario back in the day for helicopter EMS, and I was there for just a little over 3.5 years.
What made you kind of go the route of helicopter EMS? So, because when you say that, it sounds like it's a very specific route. When you're flying helicopters, imagine a million jobs you could do. But what made you kind of go in that direction?
Well, as I kind of mentioned earlier in the podcast, when I was in my early 20s, I again made a series of kid-like mistakes over the course of an evening, and found myself doing well above the speed limit on a highway in New Brunswick, and fell asleep and went off about a 40-foot cliff. So, following that incident and surviving that, I said, I always wanted to get into a career, having watched the work and the kindness, of the first responders that morning, watching their professionalism, watching how they changed my life, and then it kind of capped with a law enforcement officer coming in when I was in the hospital and just explaining to me what had happened, what could happen because of the errors that I had made. And they were extraordinarily kind. I'll never forget the conversation they had with me. They just said, "Look, John, I think you've probably had enough time to think back on the poor decisions you made last night. Fortunately, you and your brother are fine. And I'm just going to give you the opportunity to know what could happen, but there's going to be no charges laid. And I just hope you take this opportunity to slow down a bit and just put some thought into what could have happened, and maybe just take a little different direction." And it was one of the greatest gifts that anyone's ever given me, because it fundamentally changed my direction, and it fundamentally changed my life.
Well, it clearly stuck with you.
Oh, it did.
All the way up until that point where you're deciding, this is at some point in flying helicopters, you figure, there's this path over here, but of all the things I can do with this machine, I want to go down this route.
Yeah,
so
absolutely. Yeah, I wanted to make a difference. And, that situation back in my early 20s, combined with watching the air ambulance helicopter land in Ontario, and then learning about, what the program did. And of course, until you're in it, you don't really understand just how much of an impact it has. But once I was in it, I knew right away that this is exactly where I needed to be in Ontario. And then in 2002, I got headhunted out of the blue by Stars out of Calgary at the time. And then again, that has transpired into what has been just a remarkable and unbelievable career for the past 21 years with Stars.
Wow. Has it been with Stars ever since? It work with any other companies, or?
No, with Stars primarily. I have had the opportunity to do contract work, primarily in the summer times with London Air Services, which is London Drugs aviation parent company out of Vancouver. We did transition into a helicopter called the Augusta Westland 139 for a short time in Edmonton and Calgary. It was a larger aircraft. We talked a little bit about de-icing. And while we were waiting for our aircraft to get delivered, they opened up an opportunity for a few of the pilots to come and do vacation coverage for them. And that was remarkable. It was the first time in my life I'd ever flown without a helmet, without flight boots, and in a basically dress pants and a shirt. It was fantastic. And they operate aircraft between the Vancouver airport and areas all around Vancouver, primarily up to a resort called the Sonora Resort up in the islands northwest of Vancouver. And again, it was a door that opened, and I just walked right through it. And it was a remarkable experience and a great opportunity to get additional time on an aircraft that would eventually be our helicopter EMS aircraft for a couple of years here in Edmonton.
Okay. So when you joined Stars, what's kind of, I guess you come in, and do you have to do any further qualifications? And can you walk us through what the training is like to be a pilot with Stars?
Sure. Yeah. That is one remarkable thing about Stars. So nobody comes in new. Everybody comes in with experience. And as we all have arrogance in life, we think we're coming in with some experience. And when I came to Stars, I recognized that I had a lot to learn. And again, being an adult learner is a lot of fun. When I came into STARS, they were just initially starting their night vision goggle program.
Mm.
So STARS was the first civilian organization in Canada to start using night vision goggles. Now, this is in a post 9/11 world where NVGs, so I'll call them from now on, are they're controlled good. And if you've ever looked through an actual pair of authentic military grade NVGs, you will understand that that's not something that they want the enemy to have. So they're very controlled. And at the time, post 9/11, you couldn't even get them unless you were military in Canada.
Mm.
At the time, the G7, G8 summit was occurring down in Kananaskis, and the United States government had some concerns with whether or not their helicopters were too big to be landing at the hospitals in Calgary, which was the case. And they're also a little bit concerned with their familiarity with the Canadian healthcare system. So they approached STARS and they said, look, in the highly unlikely event of an incident with then President Bush, would your team be willing to come into Kananaskis and pick him up and bring him back to the city?
Mm.
So we said, again, our CEO, and absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
However, there's a problem. We can't fly in at night. To which the United States government went, will help us understand that. So we explained to them that, in order to fly in at night, you had to have night vision goggles. We were flying into Banff and Canmore using specialized routes and certain altitudes and GPS, but that was very early days. And when I listened to the stories of the pilots flying into those two areas at nighttime, again, I'm kind of awestruck. And when we explained this situation to the government, they said, well, we think that we can fix that. And within the course of about a half a year, STARS was given 4 sets of night vision goggles. We had a grant through one of our donors to get the aircraft certified for night vision flight. We partnered with Transport Canada, and we've been using NVGs and night vision goggles since 2002, ever since, on every mission with every base at nighttime.
Wow.
Across all 6 bases in Western Canada.
Wow. That's pretty cool partnership too.
It really was. Yeah, just an amazing partnership. And so when you come into STARS, for sure you have to have your instrument rating. So you have to be, comfortable in cloud, fly approaches just like, our partners do with WestJet, Air Canada, and others. You have to have nighttime. And then you have to have a certain amount of twin engine time in order to for them to look at your resume seriously. I was fortunate that I had all those things with my experience. And then once you get there, the aviation part as well as the medical part have a tremendous amount of extra training. I've never in my career had the type of training that I get at STARS. We have an annual recurrency, number of tests on the new aircraft that we're flying, the Airbus H145. We go down to Texas initially for a month of simulation and classroom training. And then we go back every 6 months to kind of take care of we do a 4-hour focus session on the emergencies that are really going to put you in a high risk situation. And then again, on the 1-year cycle, you go back for a week and you do your Transport Canada pilot proficiency check, or what's commonly referred to as a PPC.
What would be some of the higher risk type of things you would train for?
So I think the common ones are engine failures.
Okay.
The really high risk ones are tail rotor loss, particularly tail rotor loss in the hover. Getting into a situation like a dust ball, an ash ball, a snowball. So where you completely lose your references coming out of a scene call, and you basically need to put the aircraft in an attitude that allows you to get up and out of the snowball without being able to see anything using instruments. And then once you're up and above the snowball at a couple 100 feet, you rotate and fly away.
So is this stuff like as the rotor's going, it's blowing everything up and you can't see anything. You don't know what direction you're really looking.
For sure, yeah. So if any of your listeners have seen any of the YouTube videos, it's a common occurrence. It happens, generally it happens in 3 different situations. In dust, so around a construction site, in the desert, snow. There was an incident in Utah where 2 military helicopters got into a snowball effect, doing an exercise and crashed into each other in the snowball. That was just a year or 2 ago. And then the last one, so we've talked about dust, we talked about snow, and then for forest fire situations, there is times where forest fighters will get injured and will go in. And it's not something you expect, but when you go into a situation where you have a lot of ash on the ground, ash will do exactly what snow does, and it creates a snowball. You lose all your visibility. So we train for things like that. We also train for losing engines at high altitude, being able to maneuver down into the valleys to get out of the mountains on one engine, and then inadvertent flight into clouds. So you're flying along, you're on your way into Jasper. The weather is forecast to be okay, but as you come around a valley doing 230 kilometers an hour, all of a sudden the weather just goes from 3 miles to 1 to 2 to quarter to nothing. And just how to maneuver the aircraft safely and appropriately to get away from the sides of the rocks and maneuver yourself in a valley and turn around and go back in the direction that you knew the weather was good and go back home.
Do helicopters experience, the term escapes me now, but when you're in the airplane, turbulence. So do you get turbulence, and does it feel the same as being in I just know from like being in a passenger jet, is it the same as that?
No, I'd say it's probably a bit more violent. Helicopters are quite a bit smaller, particularly our
half
bases.
our listeners are like, I'm never going in a helicopter.
Yeah, well, again, I think that most helicopter companies they're not going to go out in severe turbulence, but our bases in Grand Prairie and Calgary do experience severe turbulence trying to get into the rocks frequently. Again, I think the human factor will turn back before the aircraft factor would. So the aircraft will take more than you can as a human, and we take a look at the weather multiple times during the day. It's something we check before we go on every mission. And if they're reporting severe turbulence, we generally don't go.
Okay. Well, probably some of the craziest helicopter stories I've ever heard is when I listen to any podcasts on people that have flown in like Vietnam, and they're just getting into all kinds of stuff. And, maybe they got one engine or tail rotor's gone or something. But on a we'll say an equivalency basis, like where would a STARS pilot be in terms of training? Are they up there? Like they're probably some of the best trained helicopter pilots, maybe even in the world? Or is it kind of like, your experience, but the military is still kind of the best pilots? Or?
Well, I think best is an interesting word. I think that the STARS training program, for sure, from my experience, is the best that I've ever experienced. A lot of our pilots at STARS, the vast majority of them are ex-military, so they've already had a tremendous amount of experience with what is a very robust training process through the Canadian military. The remainder of the pilots are ex-commercial, and again, these commercial companies across Canada have varying degrees of very good training. I think when we come to STARS, a good chunk of our training team are ex-military combined with great commercial trainers, and they're looking worldwide to determine what we need to be proficient at. There's a difference between proficiency, a checkbox, and currency, and we really work on proficiency. So it's not one and done. We don't go away, for that 1 week a year. We have quarterly, monthly requirements. We have 90-day and 60-day requirements. And again, it's not just taking a helicopter and going for a rip around the Edmonton International Airport. We go down to some pretty complex confined areas down in the Millet area, down in these depressed railways and railway track areas to the east of Millet. And thanks to all the community members out there who allow us to fly and train out there at night. We do a lot of instrument flying, a lot of instrument training. And again, we go back to the simulator in now Texas, Arlington, Texas, and run the teams through kind of the worst of the worst. The simulator allows you, as many of your listeners have had different types of simulators for different types of jobs, it allows you to be in an artificial environment that is as real as you can make it, push yourself to the absolute limits, work as a team, and trap those errors. And that's what we're really focusing on when we do our training, is identifying an error, identifying an issue, trapping it, stopping it, fixing it, and then making the right decision using checklists. And that's what our job is really focused on up front. It's monitoring the helicopter and making sure that we are well ahead of the game as the environment and things change, because that is the one big difference, I think, between fixed wing and rotary. Many of the locations that, at least in the corporate and the commercial world, that fixed wing aircraft land are fairly controlled. So it's an airport environment. Can't say the same thing for a lot of the work that's done up in the Arctic with the Twin Otters and so on and so forth. It's very, very challenging landing, and certainly overseas in mountainous regions. But generally speaking, in Canada, it's a pretty controlled environment. from a rotary standpoint, particularly helicopter EMS, it's very uncontrolled. So one night we can be landing on a highway, then we can be landing in the middle of the woods, and then we can be up at 7,000 feet in the mountains.
Jeez.
So it ranges, and the training that we get prepares us for all of those situations and many more. And again, they want to just fill our tool belt with as many tools as they possibly can in the hopes that you never have to use them. And policing is the same, right?
Yeah. So when you get into STARS, do you start with a rank, or do you follow a rank structure there?
Yeah, generally speaking, you will come into STARS as either a first officer or a co-captain. I came in as a co-captain, which means that you still need 100 hours of mission profile time before you can become a captain. And then once you have 100 hours of missions and different types of experience, different types of missions under your belt in using, STARS policies and procedures and understanding how the organization works and what the requirements are as a captain, then you go through a captain's board, which basically is an interview process, a fairly lengthy one, followed by a couple of rides. And if those all go well, you get upgraded to captain.
Okay. And then is that like the operational side of things that you top out as a captain, or are there like a bunch of ranks?
So for the most part, all the pilots, certainly in Edmonton, are all captains. And then if you have training background, you can be a training captain. So that would be someone that would be responsible for training. And then within the training department, there is a chief pilot. And then we have an assistant chief pilot. And that's kind of the ranks within, the captain group themselves.
Okay. So can you kind of walk us through some of your experiences as being a member of STARS?
Wow. Yeah. So where do I begin? I probably have 1,800 missions. So 1,800 individual patient touches.
Mm-hmm.
And every one of them has been unbelievably unique. There are a number, of course, that always stand out.
Maybe I'll start with a bit of so when you're flying, are you the paramedic ever at all? Do people switch roles, or it's the pilots are the pilots, the medics are the medics?
That's a great question. So we're very much a team, but we're a team of 4. And that's in the helicopter. So on board every STARS mission, we have 2 pilots, and that can be a combination of captain, first officer. And then in the back, which is where the magic really happens, is we have a critical care nurse. And because of the training that they get and the support that they get from the transport physicians, we have a designation critical care paramedic. So we have a critical care team in the back of the helicopter. They're supported outside of the helicopter by a STARS transport physician that is on board the helicopter about 5% of the time, but always available by cell phone or sat phone or radio. And then long before we even get in the helicopter, we're supported on the front end by the engineering team that makes sure that aircraft is ready to go and that we come home safely. So that's kind of the mission profile. But there's always 2 captains on board for every call, or 2 pilots on call for every call.
So is there any kind of specific mission that really stands out in your mind as like either a very difficult flying experience or something that got like real hairy?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt. We live in Western Canada. There are spaces and places that we operate every day that have little to no weather reporting. The weather is graphically forecasted throughout kind of all of Western Alberta. So there's a lot of space out there where things can sneak up on you. We have some great technology as far as weather on the iPads that we bring with us, and we check weather before we go on every mission. But yeah, I've certainly had calls out into the mountains, so towards, Jasper, Nordig, Abraham Lake area where the weather is not forecast and you're getting yourself, quietly out towards the mountains, and then the weather turns on forecast. Again, we have the training to deal with it, but even with the training, when you're turning around in, instrument conditions in the mountains, getting yourself turned around in a valley and turning back towards Edmonton, and then the mission isn't necessarily over. Your role as one of the captains is to say, okay, that didn't work quite as well as we wanted it to. What is the next stop? So can we stop at the Shunda, forestry base and wait for EMS to come to us? Do we go back to Rocky Mountain House? Do we just abort the mission altogether? It's just a constant fluid of living in the gray, with safety being paramount. We've had unexpected icing that you pick up. I had a couple experiences in Ontario early in my career where again, you didn't necessarily have the experience to know that you probably shouldn't have been there. We had a windshield fire, an electrical fire on board the helicopter when I was in instrument conditions back early in my days when I was flying in Ontario. And we couldn't get out of cloud. The ceiling was too low below us, and we couldn't get the fire out. So it was extraordinarily difficult to be inside an aircraft that smelled like burning paint, trying to be on instruments, keeping everybody calm with a patient on board in the back. And again, it had a good result. It had a good end. We just systematically and thoughtfully figured out how we were going to get to ground, and eventually pulled the circuit breakers, which shut off the window heat, which essentially, ended up putting out the fire. I had 2 patients wake up one night, both of which had been extraordinarily unkind to each other prior to us putting them asleep and transporting them to hospital. And their medications wore off in the dead of night, and they started fighting in the back of the helicopter. Wow. That was extraordinarily uncomfortable. That was before I was flying with night vision goggles. And I've had a lot of close calls, near misses, we call them. Prior to even getting into twin engine helicopters, I actually had 3 separate mechanical full-on engine failures in helicopters, resulting in auto rotations to the ground, 2 of which while I was at flight school. So
what's the auto rotation?
So auto rotation. So again, Hollywood's an interesting thing. When a helicopter finds itself in a situation where it has no power, it can still land safely. And that's one of the emergency profiles that we train. So you glide out of the air at a high descent. You're between 2,500 to 3,000 feet per minute down. But if you have a space the size of a baseball field, you can land. So you use the inertia that's in the main rotor system. And through physics, it continues to spin that rotor system. You can turn the aircraft left, right. You can extend your glide or you can shorten your glide. But essentially, you have a space that is a couple hundred feet by a couple hundred feet that you need to land the helicopter in. And again, you train for that in the simulator. You train for that in flight school. And I found myself on a couple of occasions have a major mechanical issue and have to rotate even before I started flying twin engine helicopters, which was one of the reasons why I quickly needed to move both psychologically and physically into a twin engine helicopter. I had kind of had it with single engine helicopters, and it's extraordinarily rare to have an engine failure. I have pilots that I fly with now, a couple in particular, that have twice the amount of hours that I have, in the tens and tens of thousands. They've never had an engine failure.
Really?
I just found myself in that situation and was fortunate to have the training and the luck for it to work out well.
Wow. Is there anywhere that the stars won't go? Is there like an absolute no-go area, or is it just kind of weather dependent whether they'll go somewhere or not?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it always comes down to weather and fuel. So just about a month ago, our Grand Prairie base went almost 2,000 kilometers total flight up to Watson Lake, Yukon Territory. Now, there was a lot of questions that were asked before they went up there, but the United States Coast Guard was not available out of Anchorage and out of the Alaskan area. And it was at nighttime, so there's only a limited amount of helicopters that can fly at night on night vision goggles. And through some discussions with our STARS transport position and the entities for emergency up in the territories, it was determined that the aircraft out of Grand Prairie was the most appropriate vehicle, weapon, to bring that critical care team in the back. And away they went. And they ended up refueling multiple times en route, picking up this individual who was quite seriously injured, and then dropping them off at the Fort Nelson Hospital and then returning back to Grand Prairie.
Wow.
Yeah. So where can we go? Again, we'll go wherever we need to go. But what we're really trying to do is deliver that critical care team to those appropriate patients. And there are times when the helicopter can't go that we're now starting to transition into, well, perhaps it can go by fixed wing. So we're partnering with Alberta Health Services to send our team and that level of care by fixed wing. We're also doing quite a bit of ground transfers. So there are some communities that don't have helipads. There's some nights that the weather, or some days that the weather just does not accommodate flight. So again, it's about getting that critical care team to the right patient in the right modality, whatever it is, agnostic platform. And now our teams are starting to go by ground as well.
Well, so kind of maybe 2 questions that overlap, but how big is the program? Like, how many helicopters do you have available? And is it a 24-hour program? But also with that, how do you decide what you're going to dispatch to? Because I imagine lots of people are probably looking for an air ambulance. So how do you decide where you go or who you're going to help, I guess?
Yeah. So all great questions. So I'll kind of go from 40,000 feet down to the minutia. So we have 6 bases located across Western Canada that are all 24/365. We have day shift and night shift, and those bases are located in Winnipeg, Regina, Saskatoon, Edmonton, Calgary, and Grand Prairie. Calgary being the first one that started up in 1985. On site each day, we have a full complement of engineering support, 2 pilots, medic, and a nurse. There's a transport physician on call all times. And we have the support of the STARS Emergency Link Center that takes care of the coordination and the logistics of everything. And again, there are anywhere between 2 to 4 critical call takers down at the STARS Emergency Link Center in Calgary. So that's the high level view. We have a dispatch time of in and around, I just generally say under 15 minutes. So from the time the call comes in, we'll check the weather. Once we determine that the weather is favorable and safe enough for us to fly, at that point in time, we'll accept the mission. And then the mission profile kind of begins at that point, and out the door we go, and we're on our way to the call. What type of calls do we go on? So anyone who's familiar with the 911 kind of dispatching system, a call will come into 911, and in the first second, no one really knows what it is. And then the dispatchers will start to ask a series of questions from a series of cards. Those cards, depending on what responses they get, will escalate up in severity. And at a certain point in time, a certain type of call, if it's serious enough, will engage the STARS program.
Okay.
So the 911 system will connect with our STARS Emergency Link Center. We get what they call tagged with the call. And at that point in time, our Emergency Link Center starts to collect some data as to what's going on. And those calls would be what most, of your listeners would imagine: shootings, strokes, heart attacks, serious motor vehicle accidents, drownings, electrocutions, falls from a great height, any major injury to the core, a loss of a limb, and anything you can imagine. So those are the types of calls that would come in as to what we call a scene call. Again, we can refuel, we can go by ground, we can partner with Alberta Health Services and go by fixed wing, but it's only a certain type of call, generally speaking, that we would get launched on because of the mechanism of injury. The other type of calls that we go on, and it's a breakdown of about 50%, the other types of calls on are interfacility calls, or what we call IFTs. An interfacility call would be a community that lies outside of Edmonton, Calgary, Grand Prairie, that has a patient present themselves to the hospital. The hospital does all the great work that they do in that community to the highest level that they can, but they determine that that patient needs to come to a higher level of care, either a trauma center or an ICU, or in the case of little kids or little babies, one of the hospitals here in the city that takes care of little pediatrics and little neonates, little kids. And at that point in time, if it's determined that STARS is the best mode of transport given the level of care that's needed, then we'll get dispatched for what we call an interfacility call or an IFT. How does it happen? Our STARS transport physician and our air medical crew will consult with a doctor on the other end at that rural hospital. They'll have a back and forth about the situation at hand, what the condition of the patient is. Oftentimes, our STARS transport physician will give advice. And then if it's determined that that patient does in fact need to come to the city, then our team will go out and they start administering critical care as soon as they arrive. They continue that care all the way back to the hospital. And then we hand that patient over to the capable hands of whatever center we're landing at whatever base we are, be it that Winnipeg, Grand Prairie, Edmonton, or Calgary or other.
So one of the things that I know I've done a few times, being with the police, and we've done, it's like an ambulance has to go from, we just do an escort for them, but they have to go from the Royal Alec to the U of A. And they need us to block intersections. They can't stop, I guess, whoever they're transporting once they get them off, whatever machines or things are hooked up to, got X amount of time, we got to get to the other place, get them hooked up and cared for. So is that kind of like something stars might get called for, those type of events?
Yeah, pretty rare. However, I've been on a number of them. So different hospitals in the Edmonton, we'll just speak specifically to Edmonton. Different hospitals in the region have specific teams at that hospital that deal with very specific situations.
Mm-hmm.
A AAA with a heart, stroke, a major, some sort of major injury. And, surgical suites are open at certain amounts of time. The ones that I've been dispatched to, for instance, I've been sent up to St. Albert because of traffic around 5:00 at night, where a patient has had a massive incident occur with their heart, and the surgical team is at another center in Edmonton. They know that the amount of time that they have is very limited. They know that we can give blood, and that's one of the things that we have on board the helicopter. And they know that the speed in which we can get from the Sturgeon Hospital in St. Albert to, let's say, the U of A or the Grace Hospital is very quick. So we'll be sent for those kind of things. The other thing and it's generally revolves around traffic. We've had incidents where an individual will present themselves, let's say, to the Grey Nuns Hospital, and they need to get to the U of A. And for whatever reason, the traffic is very bad.
Yeah.
And we just happen to be in the area. Then we'll land at the Grey Nuns, and we'll transport to the U of A Trauma Center. So it's pretty rare, though.
It sounds like the helicopter would have more equipment on it than just a regular ambulance then?
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment. Yeah, the back of the helicopter is essentially a flying intensive care unit.
Yeah.
So it's the talent in the back. So you've got your critical care team, your nurse paramedic, supported by the STARS transport physician. But in the back of that helicopter, we have monitors, ventilators, we have blood, we have ultrasound. We have a mini lab where we can get lab results on your blood within 2 minutes.
In the helicopter?
In the helicopter.
Wow.
Yep. We have 4 pumps that are on the wall that, again, the medical team could speak to. But it is, they're able to administer a myriad of different drugs that do a myriad of different biological, things to your body. And again, it is essentially a flying intensive care unit. The blood administration is fantastic. We're starting a new program in Saskatchewan, which will be coming to Alberta fairly soon for serious trauma requiring infusions into your body. And again, we're looking all around the world for that next skill set that our team in the back can learn, and in the front, but in the back can learn to make a difference. And our founders' thought process was, one patient lost is one patient too many. So we have the vision to look around the world and determine what other helicopter EMS units are doing and what they're exploring, and bring those things to Canada so we can administer critical care the moment that our teams land on the side of a highway, the edge of a lake, the edge of a riverbank, or in a rural community that needs a very, very sick patient attended to immediately. We support that community by bringing that intensive care unit directly to their door, and that work begins as soon as our team in the back lays hands on that patient.
Okay. And one thing you kind of mentioned that I was looking to get to was, what are some of the examples around the world that are similar to STARS? And do you work with any of these people?
So there's a number right across Canada. There's programs in British Columbia. Obviously, we're kind of Western Canada. There's the Orange program in Ontario. There's a new program that started up in Quebec, and then there's a program out in Halifax. We look down to the States for some of our partners. There's Riga helicopters across the seas. We have London HEMS, which is London HEMS. There are programs in Australia, New Zealand that we look to as well. And they're doing some incredible things. There is a program in London that has, and again, if Dom, one of our nurses, was listening, he'd tell me the name, but there is it's basically a way that they can block blood flow off below your abdomen to keep all the blood in the core of your body by putting a balloon inside your femoral arteries and blocking off blood going to your legs, because your core needs the body. They do this in the field.
Wow.
we're using ultrasound right now with stars, and it's quite a remarkable little tool. It's this small wand that you would see, in an ultrasound lab, but it's attached to an iPad. So we're able to take that information, and they're able to look at your heart, look at your kidneys, look in your abdomen to see if there's any bleeding. They're able to do, when they take a needle and put it into your veins, they're actually able to look at your veins and your arteries and make sure that that needle is going into the right vein to be able to give you the drugs that they need. They're able to look basically within your body in real time, take those pictures, do a screenshot or a video screenshot, send that back to our STARS transport physician, and in the future, we'll be able to send it to the hospitals. So in real time, everybody will know what's going on with all the instrumentation and the helicopter back to a receiving facility.
So you land and they're straight in and already, they're 90% up to date on what has happened to you, what's going on.
Exactly. Yeah. And with the coordination of the STARS Emergency Link Center and the technology and the Wi-Fi capability in the new helicopters that we are traveling in, and real-time exchange of information, there's been many situations where the transport docs and the emergency and supporting casts back at the hospitals have said, you know what? This patient doesn't need to go to the emerge. They need to go direct to the OR. Mm-hmm. So instead of stopping on floor 1, our team stops on floor 3, and we go direct into the OR suite. The OR team has been completely briefed on what we're bringing through the door. And again, it's just collaborating and coordinating information with every piece of technology we have to make sure that we get the best patient outcomes. And that's the future.
Who do you find, like all this technology, who's developing most of it? Because I know for, when you look at police, a lot of our stuff comes from the military. And then I know, at least back when there was the World Wars and Vietnam and stuff, a lot of medical stuff came out of that. So is that still kind of is that still the same today? A lot comes from military experience?
For sure in the front. Most of the technology we have, both from the night vision goggles and the technology on board the aircraft, most of these aircraft companies, Airbus being the one we're using right now, they're developing military hardware. So that military hardware in time comes to the commercial world. Mm-hmm. In the back, we're looking around the world for companies that are operating in the same type of environments that we are, with equipment that is compatible to the healthcare system they're in, but that works in our world. So we need to have monitors and heart monitors and equipment that is small, light, tough. It can withstand vibrations, and it can also withstand temperature swings of -40 to +40. Mm-hmm. And again, so we can reach out to our partners in Switzerland and say, hey, are you having any luck with X piece of equipment? And they're like, yeah, actually, we were on a scene call up at 9,000 feet in the mountains about 3.5 weeks ago. It was -15 for about an hour, and it worked flawlessly. So we have in the field sharing of data and information between our partners all across the world. And that's what we use to kind of pick the equipment that will be best suited for the back of the helicopter.
Yeah. And, even same in policing, we get a piece of equipment, and usually the manufacturer, whoever, they want the feedback. And then you say, well, this worked, this didn't. Can you change this, make it better for our needs? And
Yeah, very much so. And we're experiencing that right now with Airbus. So we have, a new helicopter that's come to our organization. We just purchased 10 new Airbus H145s, of which the 10th one just arrived this week. And we're constantly in a feedback loop with them because they want their product to be the very best. And they also recognize our organizational reputation around the world as being a preeminent leader in the delivery of critical care, pre-hospital care around the world. So the weight, that we cast on a project or on a piece of equipment, they want to make their product even better. Yeah. And we know that the collaboration and support and sharing that information is only ultimately going to affect the safety of our crew on board, as well as the end state of the patients we serve.
So one of the things I wanted to kind of get into was, we were talking about like your missions that you've been on, some of your experiences. So what moved you into the role you're in now, where you're kind of running things in the northern part of Alberta? So how did you get to this position? And then what does it kind of look like? What does this job do?
Yeah, so even that's changed in the last couple of months. So I've actually taken on the entire provincial operations role since about July. So initially it was just supporting Edmonton and Grand Prairie, and now it's supporting all three of our bases in Alberta, along with the support into Eastern British Columbia. And how did I get there? On paper, it's a tricky trick. But as I mentioned earlier, my current CEO, Andrea, and my previous CEO and founder, Dr. Powell, have looked to me over the years to support change and growth and development in an undeveloped area. So it started off with Manitoba. I had a couple of management positions within the aviation group prior to that. I had supported our aviation team primarily in the expansion into Saskatchewan, and just supported them as a bit of a subject matter expert, both based on experience and time at STARS, as to how do you transition our organization and the policies, procedures, partially, but more the culture. How do you transition that into a province that has never had it before? And that started with Saskatchewan and then translated over into Manitoba. And then in Manitoba, it was a remarkable experience. I was so proud to be there, and I love Manitoba. As mentioned earlier, my wife's family is from there. But we started off with a motorhome, a barbecue, an oxygen supply, a partnership with the hospital to get the equipment we needed, and a helicopter. And that was it. Mm-hmm. And that needed to transition into finding bricks and mortar, all the things that go into building relationships with companies that bring you supplies. We bought a couple of Atco trailers, and then we added that outside of a hangar. And that developed into the base and developed into what is essentially multiple missions per day. In Manitoba, we're actually flying our critical care teams on board fixed wing as well and doing a lot of ground transport. And that became the evolution of what we call Star 7 in Manitoba. I had the opportunity to come back to Alberta and support in a director role, and that moved into a provincial director role. And now it's a combination of being on the flight line one week a month, and then the other 3 weeks are focused on supporting our foundation team with donor recognition, donor development, meeting donors, and generating funds for the organization. Mm-hmm. And the other major part of my role is the general operations of making sure that each mission goes well, both from an engineering, aviation, and aeromedical standpoint. And that's essentially the role, is making sure that all the operational requirements across the province are there, such that every mission is successful and safe.
So, and we had a bit of a conversation beforehand, and you were talking about some of the donors and the people that have helped out with the program. So I know on the website it talks a bit about the funding, but could you explain it for some of the listeners? Maybe some people don't want to go read things.
Yeah, no problem at all. It is really a remarkable setup in the sense that if you have made any donation to our organization at any point in time, you're part of every mission. That's the 40,000-foot view. STARS is partially funded by the government of Alberta, here specifically in Alberta. And the rest of the donations, the better part of 70 to 75% of them are from the general public and companies supporting our organization. So if you have any NASCAR or Formula One fans out there, there's sponsorships. So when you look at the helicopter, you'll see, if you look closely, that there are numerous stickers on that helicopter. Our government support is there. So we have the governments of Alberta, Manitoba, and Saskatchewan, which all support our organization. And then you'll see other companies and community initiatives that have raised at least $250,000 all the way up to multiple millions of dollars. And the recognition of that incredible donation to the patients we serve is seen on the helicopter and represented by a sticker. So you'll see the $250,000 to $500,000 stickers on the tail, and then moving up the tail boom and then up to the upper cowling would be equivalent to the front nose of an F1. Mm-hmm. Yeah, or the actual driver's suit. Yeah. So that's how it kind of works. And we partner with communities, individuals, companies, private donors, right across Western Canada to keep the program free. So there's never a cost to any of the patients that we fly. And we're able to deliver that critical care and continue all of the work and the cost that it takes to keep that training where it needs to be at a world-class, world-leading pre-hospital level, absolutely with the support of our donors. And when you look at the helicopter next time, you'll see all of the contributors And there's thousands of others behind the scenes
Yeah.
that make, this incredible organization work.
Well, and part of the conversation we were having, just speaking on like making things work, was how many people behind the scenes it takes to make, you have the pilot and you see the helicopter and then the medical team that comes out of the helicopter and does stuff. So you really only see the 4 people at the front of it and the aircraft. But there's a ton of people behind the scenes that make them functional, make the helicopter functional, and then get all the donations and all this other stuff. So it's quite a, I don't want to say quite a project to keep going.
Yeah, absolutely. And, we were sharing just, within your service, there are so many people that are involved long before you even get into your vehicle to go and do the great work that you do. And often those people don't get recognized. Our organization is many hundred strong. And I have the analogy that I've shared with many of my colleagues of a really beautifully crafted watch. So when you look at the face of a watch, you see the hands. And the hands on the clock it's very obvious what they do, and that is the helicopter. So people have a very clear understanding of what that is. But what they've looked right through is the glass. And the glass that protects the hands on that watch, that's our engineering team. We wouldn't be protected without it. And they make sure that we leave and get home every day from a maintenance standpoint. Underneath the face of that watch is all of the mechanisms. So you've got big cogs, little cogs, all spinning simultaneously together in unison to make sure that the hands of the clock, the helicopter itself, can be up and ready and mission ready for the next patient. And then that is everybody within the stars, from the front desk at reception all the way up to my CEO. Underneath driving all that is the battery. And that's our foundation team, fundraising, and partnering with all the donors across Canada to make sure that the STARS program is there for the next person that we need to go out and serve. Well, everybody sees that watch face up in the sky, but there's just so many, and the same with law enforcement. There's just so many cogs and wheels underneath that just make everything seamlessly work. It's really quite remarkable.
Well, and one of the things I was looking at the website just before we started too, you kind of have like a testimonial section in there, like people saying their experience, and then just why they're thankful that STARS is, I guess, exists, and then was able to help them. It kind of got me thinking. I was like, I don't know why the police services don't do this, especially with just the amount of bad media we get from time to time. But having some real positive outcomes out there and putting those out. But I thought that was really cool on the website. I thought that was a good idea.
Yeah, so we call them VIPs, or very important patients, and really they're the reason that we do everything that we do. Law enforcement is very similar. Every single time we go out and touch a patient's life, that interaction is captured forever. And with our VIPs, of which I've had, well over 1,000, they, in some cases, have become part of my life, and our fabric interweaves. I picked up this young boy. I won't say his name, but he knows who he is if he's listening to this. In his teens, he and his best friend were involved in a very serious car accident. And I remember supporting our air medical crew, working on him as we went down the hospital elevator when we got to the rooftop, and they had to get some more drugs, and they needed me to do an intervention that I was trained to do and support, and I did that. And I remember thinking when that elevator door closed and he went into the trauma bay that I would likely never see that kid again. And many months later, he walked in for breakfast and wanted to thank his crew. That transitioned into becoming friends with him, meeting his family, and ultimately meeting his beautiful fiancée and now wife, and now their kids. And right around mid-July, we try and get together every couple of years to celebrate kind of that day. And we've remained friends ever since. And I've watched him grow from a young boy all the way up to a dad with beautiful kids and a beautiful wife and a fantastic family. And long after I'm gone, we will be part of his fabric and history. And I would say that the police is no different. And it's sad that the recognition for all of the first responders out there who are part of any journey, with anyone where the outcome becomes even slightly better, isn't always recognized. And, I recognized very early in my career with STARS that a lot of those first responders don't get the recognition that they deserve because, again, the helicopter is easy to splash, into the into the lines on a paper. But I recognize all the work that takes on every single call I go on, law enforcement, fire, EMS, parks, sheriffs, bystanders, dispatch. And then that's just on the front end. You add all the people that are involved, from the security officers that meet us on the rooftop to the myriad of help through occupational, physio, speech, all the trauma.
Yeah.
It's incredible how many people are involved on both sides, in your line of profession and mine, of every call we do. It's hard to even fathom, to be honest with you.
Well, and you were mentioning setting things up for the visit for the Pope.
Yeah. Fascinating.
Do you want to give us a bit on that?
Sure.
Talk a bit about that.
So
don't
again,
mean to keep you here forever.
No, that's fine.
I'll just keep asking questions.
We'll
and
edit.
you tell me.
We'll edit whatever we need to. And again, it's my pleasure to be here with you this morning, Nathan.
This was just a fascinating story, I thought, with the amount of planning that went in, and then you were talking just about the partnerships, but also the coordination with the Pope's team and just translating things and having blood work ready and where are you flying them to?
Very much so, yeah. So it's hard to even know where to begin. I guess the most important thing was it was an honor to be asked to support a visit in the hopes that visit would positively change the situation that we find ourselves in as a nation with our Indigenous communities. That's first and foremost. That's my comment. That's my feeling. And I've had the blessing of working with so many different Indigenous communities in the Arctic and in Canada. My wife works closely with the Enoch Cree Nation to the west of Edmonton with their children. And it was just an honor to be asked for that reason. Mm-hmm. From an operational standpoint, STARS was asked to be the critical care provider in the highly unlikely event that something happened to the Pope or one of the Pope's support network from the Vatican. And we were an extraordinarily small piece of an enormous puzzle. So throughout the course of 55 to 60 days, and generally speaking, these types of initiatives take years to plan, but that's just was not the way that this one worked out. I sat in on meetings, 3 or 4 meetings a week with our partners with the RCMP, Edmonton Police, Health Canada, Alberta Health Services. We had a lot of mental health support, Indigenous affairs, the communities themselves, and then the Vatican, and then Ottawa. So these meetings would occur in different sections, throughout the planning for the events. And primarily we were involved with the communities in Maskwacis and Lac Saint Anne. And it was remarkable to see the different lenses that all of these amazing people bring to the table. We have, Graham and his team getting ready for Commonwealth and the thousands of people and how they do all the logistics behind the scenes, both from a policing and a healthcare and a mental health standpoint. And then our role was basically in the highly unlikely event that something were to happen during the periods where the Pope was outside of Edmonton city limits, essentially the Anthony Henday and beyond. Our team would be there as a support network for the advanced care EMS or emergency medical system ambulance team that was in the motorcade. And we were asking questions like, are we able to see the Pope's papal records? And of course, they need to maintain the utmost of privacy. So we would be asking about, well, can we get blood type? And, well, how come? Well, we carry blood on board. We want to just make sure that in the highly unlikely event that something happens, we have the right blood type. We would ask questions about medical records. And of course, they can't share those with us, but we wanted to make sure that, in fact, that they were translated into English. Mm-hmm. One of the comments back was, well, the Pope's private physician will be with them. And again, this is the brilliance of law enforcement and others looking at it with a lens. Well, in the event of something extraordinarily untoward, they may not survive an attack. Mm-hmm. So we need to have somebody that can either translate that or they need to be translated into English. And just the different lens that Edmonton Police Service, the RCMP, everybody brought to the table was really quite remarkable. We talked during one conversation about what was the nearest hospital in the event that something occurred during the motorcade. And one of the responses, both from our team and the team at Alberta Health Services, was your nearest hospital is the amazing advanced care practitioners that are in the ambulances a couple vehicles behind you. That's your first go. Your next go is lock down the highway, and our team will land to support, the professionals on board those ambulances, and collectively we'll work as a team. And then, we may do some interaction with, the injuries at that time, and then we'll go to the nearest hospital. And then, of course, that conversation led to, okay, so you're going to go directly to the ER. Possibly. Depends on what happens. We might go directly to the OR, or we might go directly to the cath lab for heart.
They want to know exactly where he is at every single second.
Of course they do.
Wherever you take him. It's like, no, the whole team's going with him.
Very much so. And then it's a partnership with, who is STARS going to carry, and then who is the RCMP going to carry, and then Air 2, which is the Edmonton Police Service helicopter, doing overwatch to make sure that everybody's safe and nothing else is going to occur. And during the motorcade, we were flying back behind the motorcade with Air 2, doing primary overwatch cover, communicating back and forth with them, communicating with the RCMP helicopter on site, just to make sure that we're all in the same page. We're also talking with the motorcade in the highly unlikely event that anything happened, just to make sure. And then behind the scenes, again, you have all the support of the hospitals who would be ready for us in the event that anything happened during any of the events. And then Transport Canada giving us airspace clearance to come in, the back and forth with that, plus the average mission that may go on during the day that might occur in those restricted airspaces. So all this is going on behind the scenes. It was a fascinating 55 days of back and forth dialogue, and just absolutely one of the highlights of my professional career in the last couple of years.
Well, and just to think, so that's just you planning, that part, and it sounds like a nightmare to plan that much stuff, and then you'd have some police person planning all of that same amount of stuff from the police side, and you got the fire, and you got whoever else.
Ours, when you listen to our partners with Alberta Health Services, Health Canada, RCMP, ours was a drop in the pond. We were just such a small piece, and I recognized that, and I just came to have such admiration for all of the planning that goes on. People just, in a rock concert occurs in Edmonton. The amount of planning that goes on to make sure that everything is ready in the event of, absolutely remarkable. And on the RCMP and Edmonton Police side, we were able to come in and have some conversations and be part of some very private conversations. And just so grateful to be able to see the lens on which health and law enforcement put on these types of events, in the hopes that, again, it can perhaps in the future change our nation for the better.
Yeah. I think it's a amazing program, and it's likely to only expand. I don't see why they wouldn't, the provinces wouldn't continue to sign contracts. I don't imagine there's any other people that can really do what you do. It's a pretty niche market.
It is a niche market. There's no doubt that we have some incredible health EMS programs across the country, and again, our organization is always there to open new doors and walk through them. We're looking to the future of supporting communities across Western Canada that things like satellites and Starlink and the SpaceX program are bringing to the table. In the years to come, there will be communities that will be able to have interaction and telecommunications abilities that they've never had before.
Yeah.
And while the helicopter may not necessarily be there, they'll be able to talk to our STARS transport physicians and get real-time information to support patients who are in those communities. So that virtual care part, I think, is a big part of our future. And certainly we recognize that the helicopter is a great tool, but what is the next tool to be able to bring that world-leading pre-hospital care, critical care to those patients when they're needed? And those are the questions that we're asking ourselves, and we're continuing to see what those windows and doors are right across the world.
So just before we do go, I wanted to just ask, you do these consults with the film companies, as we mentioned in the bio, and then you have some commercial voiceover work. What can you tell me about any of this stuff?
Sure.
What are these?
It's just fun. So our organization was asked by a director here in Edmonton. His name is Raoul Bat. He was working on a production called Pipe Nation. And in that production, there is a scene where an incident occurs, and he asked if our organization would participate in assisting with that scene. And that show, have a look at it. It's gone on to do great things at the awards, and we wish it all the best. One of the caveats was that I was just so tired of hearing the wrong helicopter sound and seeing terrible editing, and just wanting to get his final product to a level where it would pass a fair amount of scrutiny, because that's just the world we live in right now, be it policing, aviation, movies. And he was gracious enough to let me into that group, and I got to bring my daughter Christiana with me, who's a real film buff and has always been interested in storyboarding and film and editing and so on. So we get to partner a little bit and work together, and that was an amazing experience. We were able to just support them to make the scene that occurred as realistic and as real life as it would be. And then on the voiceover side of things, I grew up as a kid with Paul Harvey at my grandparents' camps, on AM radio coming out of Maine, Stuart McLean, Vinyl Cafe. Those are the things I listened to as a kid. And I always wanted to be able to tell stories. So with a lot of public speaking, somebody asked me one night whether or not I had ever done any voiceover work. And of course, the answer was no. And then they said, you know what, you should really look into it. So I just took, a couple of months and looked all around Canada as to who might be a wonderful, group to go to. And I found this individual in Toronto who had individuals teaching out of Calgary. And just kind of waded in very slowly, found out what authentic meant. And that was the big thing in voiceover work, is everybody wants to be James Earl Jones. But the truth of the matter is that's very few people.
Yeah.
Sam Elliott's another one who used to do the Dodge Ram commercials. Yeah. But what you see more and more is a little bit more of a move to more authenticity and natural. And that was a big breaking point for me. I don't do a lot of it. I've done some education for Alberta Health Services. I've done a few things for EPS. Again, my name's not there, but my voice is attached to some of their education.
Okay.
Done a lot of stuff for STARS. Again, it's a cost-saving initiative for our organization, but they have given me so many opportunities to voice over education programs, any of the things that we've done for donation. I've done a lot of the safety videos for our new H145, where you're standing in front of a green screen, just sharing information with your team. Of course, you get a lot of ribbing for it because it's around forever. But it's been fantastic. And any opportunity that comes to voiceover something where I can be my authentic self is I just walk through those doors. They don't come around all that often. And again, I don't have a lot of time to pursue them, but it's been fantastic.
Our sergeant always gets put in front of the cameras, and we make a lot of memes about him. So
yeah, well, and you know what? When you get stuck in front of the media, your team will forever remember what you did well and what you didn't do well.
Yes.
I had a fantastic opportunity to anchor the 6 o'clock news with CTV many years ago, and that was an experience of a lifetime. Where the anchor at the time, Daryl McIntyre, came in. And he spoke for 5 minutes, and then he handed over to Aaron Esfeld and I. And for the next hour, I looked at a teleprompter and just hoped that I could make it through the next 55 minutes. And it was an absolutely fantastic experience.
Yeah, that would be quite the experience. I don't know if I'd be up for that, because now you have cameras on you. Just being in front of the mics is a different experience. But when people can see you, you're very vulnerable. And yeah, everybody's watching for the mistakes.
Yeah, for sure. And as long as they didn't have a heart monitor on me, I was fine. Yeah,
I know just even on here, I mispronounce things, and I sometimes catch it right away, and I just go, I'm such an idiot. Why did I say that?
Well, so, we're hard as adult learners. We're hard on ourselves, right?
Yeah.
And I just went on an enormously long hike with 2 very experienced hikers. It was almost 100 kilometers up in the Jasper and Banff corridor. And to be an adult learner in your 50s and have the theme be, don't do that, it's tough. But the truth is that I'm forever telling my kids that they need to walk through these doors and have these experiences.
Yep.
Why am I any different?
Yeah.
So everything that comes my way, I try and just go, oh, okay,
yeah,
sure, give it a go.
Lifelong learning, very important.
Much so. Yeah, keep us young, I think.
Well, that kind of brings us to the end of our time. Is there anything you think we missed? Anything I didn't get to, or like to?
No, you know what? I think my closing kind of volley would be, I'm just so grateful and appreciative to all of the men and women that play any role in the development of my kids here in the city, the protection of my city, and professionally with my work with STARS, making sure that it's safe for us to land, and all the work that goes on long before we ever get there and long after we drop those patients off. It's recognized. I recognize it. And I just want to thank everybody who's been any part of any of those missions that I've completed since 2002.
Yeah, great. I'll put up a link to the STARS website, and you guys run the lottery every year.
Yeah, lottery will be coming up early part of 2023. And again, it raises a significant amount of capital for our operations, and all those proceeds remain within the STARS organization. Yeah. It's our largest fundraiser of the year.
So that's one of the ones I always look forward to. So I'll put a link up for that. And appreciate the time. And we had some amazing stories. And I think people are going to get some really good education on the program through this. So
it's great. Appreciate the opportunity to connect with you here this morning, Nathan.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks.